County, I believe you're still under a tornado warning. Take cover immediately if you live there.
Good morning, and thank you so much for joining us on the Weather Channel. It is now 10 minutes before the hour. You've tuned in just in time for Storm Watch, which is sponsored by iOmega. Of course, we have the latest on the tropics. We've been watching Agatha, our first tropical storm of the season. Of course, it was in the eastern Pacific, but Tropical Storm Agatha is no longer a tropical storm. It has been downgraded to a tropical depression. It is centered at 20 degrees north latitude, 123.4 degrees west longitude, and that centers the storm at about 880 miles west-southwest of Cabo San Lucas, Mexico, with winds of about 25 knots or 30 miles an hour. It is moving west at 6 miles an hour, and there you see the barometric pressure, 1,007 millibars. So here is Cabo San Lucas, the southern tip now of Baja, Mexico, and because the tropical depression is moving west, that means it's moving away from the lower 48. Now the swells around our tropical depression propagating closer to the California coast will be minimal, if any, so no big influence of our tropical system here on the coastal areas of California. As you can see, it has basically dwindled down to nothing at this hour, so we can say goodbye to Tropical Storm and Tropical Depression Agatha as it continues to weaken and moves over cooler waters. Now we are watching this area in the eastern Pacific, and we've had thunderstorm activity developing off the coast of El Salvador and Guatemala here. You can see the blow up of thunderstorms with a lot of convection associated with them. And as a matter of fact, if anything were to develop, say, within the next 48 hours or so, this will be the most likely environment or area that it will develop. But we do not anticipate any development even here over the next 24 hours. If you are planning a cruise, say, to some of the islands or some of the coastal areas off of Mexico, if you're planning a vacation, say, to Puerto Vallarta, it looks pretty good, so no problems for you. As again, our tropical depression is moving away, and even though we have thunderstorm activity and a lot of convection here, we're not anticipating any organized tropical systems over the next 24 to 48 hours. Wanted to show you this. We thought this was quite interesting, as this time last year when we were talking about an El Niño pattern, which is basically just the overall warming of the Pacific waters. Notice the red here, that indicates the warmer conditions, but this year so far, the month of June, it is much cooler, and that's being indicated by the blue color here. Thus, El Niño has weakened, and that is the good news. And again, cooler waters here, so Agatha was able to just really dissipate in a short period of time. Now that's enough on the eastern Pacific. Let's talk about the Atlantic, because these areas we're still focusing our attention for the better chance for development throughout the month of June anyway in the Atlantic. And that includes the Western Caribbean, the southern Gulf of Mexico, and the Bay of Campeche, as most systems over the last 100 years or so during the month of June have developed in these general areas. Right now we have fair skies, a big, huge actually, subtropical high pressure system has been influencing the weather pattern here, so we've had a lot of subsidence, and that means a sinking of the air. So with the sinking air, we haven't had much in the way of cloud coverage, hence no tropical development either. So it's quiet, and we don't have to worry about any development over the Western Caribbean, the Gulf of Mexico, or the Bay of Campeche. So if you're planning a cruise, say, across the Caribbean waters, it looks pretty good. In the Eastern Caribbean, we do have some higher clouds, nothing tropical in terms of organization, so you don't have to worry if you are planning a cruise, say, to the islands here that make up the Lesser Antilles or Aruba, many of the islands off of the South American coast. No huge problems, so all's tranquil as far as the tropics go. Now we have had some severe weather, and let's talk about that. As yesterday we had storms across Mississippi, Georgia, hail and high wind reports. Noon in Georgia, winds in excess of 65 miles an hour. and around Vinings just north.
Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us here at the Weather Channel. I'm Marshall Seas, working alongside Dan Atkinson. We've got some severe weather to talk about. A new severe thunderstorm watch has been issued by the Storm Prediction Center, and that's for Ohio and right along the Ohio River Valley. I'll show you that box in just a moment. Also, we have some severe thunderstorms to tell you about in Ohio, and we had some big thunderstorms developing in Alabama and Georgia. But first, we still have a tropical depression to talk about. Was Tropical Storm Agatha in the eastern Pacific? As we check out your tropical update, these are the new coordinates, fresh as of 8 o'clock Pacific Daylight Time this morning. It is currently centered at 860 miles west-southwest of Cabo San Lucas, Mexico. Winds about 23 miles per hour. It is nearly stationary now. Its pressure has risen. It's now at 1,008 millibars, where it was 1,007 at the 2 o'clock advisory earlier this morning. 29.77 inches of mercury. Now, Agatha, or what's left of Agatha, now a tropical depression, has headed into cooler water. It's also encountering some shear, not conducive to re-strengthening at all. You can see a little bit of a spiral to the clouds out here in the Pacific. That's the tropical depression. It is forecast to dissipate within 12 hours. So we'll keep you advised while we watch Agatha's demise. Down here in the eastern Pacific toward the intertropical convergence zone, showers and storms pretty disorganized right now, but there's been more organization, it looks like, with disturbed weather just to the east of Central America. We're going to be watching this over the next couple of days. Perhaps it could become tropical depression number 2. Right now, though, is still suspect for what's going to occur over the next 12 to 24 hours. What's happened with El Niño? Well, this is the way it looked in October of 1997 as the sea surface temperatures heated up. That's indicated by this area shaded in the red. Sometimes it's difficult to picture this, but this is South America, and there's North America to the north, and that's the very warm sea surface temperatures. This is the way it looks now. Blue. And that means cooler than normal. Normal being about this area here that you see shaded in the green or the aqua color. The bluer it gets, the colder it gets. That means we could be seeing the development of a La Niña, which is a cooler than normal sea surface temperature in the equatorial Pacific. So keep tabs here at the Weather Channel. We keep you advised as to how this will unfold and what effect it may have on late summer or even this next coming up winter, as we are seeing some real anomalies out here in the Pacific over the last 12 months, that's for sure, and the impact substantial on the lower 48 states. Yeah, in June, if we get development of tropical systems, they develop in the Gulf of Mexico and the Western Caribbean, mostly. They can develop, we've had a couple develop a little further to the west, but very, very few. Far majority develop in those areas shaded in the red, and the tracks they have taken are indicated by those lines that you see, the yellow arrows. Nothing, I'm happy to report, is suspect this morning. Gulf of Mexico is clear, so is the Western Caribbean. High pressure, the dominant influence, and this high pressure is not generally here this time of year, but it is this year, and that's keeping it clear. So we're in pretty good shape right now. We're not in pretty good shape in some areas of the country, severe weather-wise. Yesterday was a rock day. It was a very difficult day in Georgia and South Carolina. Hail and wind damage. Tornadoes out in Mississippi and Louisiana. There was some tornadoes yesterday in Minnesota and Virginia, North Carolina, South Carolina. Today looks like we'll get rocked again. The chance for severe is very good in this area shaded in the dark orange or the red. And even in these areas shaded in the lighter orange, there's a chance for a strong thunderstorm to develop. We also have a situation developing out west, low pressure over eastern Colorado, and a low-level jet that's becoming increasingly strong, bringing up some moisture, destabilizing the atmosphere, and we do suspect the possibility of a cluster of thunderstorms developing late today that could affect you in Nebraska. Meanwhile, in Indiana and Ohio, we have a situation where a severe thunderstorm watch has just been issued. In this area of Ohio, southwestern Ohio at Butler,
Thanks for joining us for Storm Watch. Coming up, we're going to be telling you about where the severe weather is. We have a number of severe weather watches, severe thunderstorm watches in effect, and we've just had a report of a tornado touching down near Berea, North Carolina. No reports of structural damage, but we do have a lot of power outages, and that's just one of many reports that we're going to go over with you. First of all, though, let's take a look at our tropical update, and as we start out, we want to talk about Tropical Depression Agatha. As of 2 p.m. Pacific Daylight Time, this is probably going to be the last advisory for Tropical Depression Agatha. Just not a whole lot going on here. You can see the winds are down to 25 miles per hour, so it is weakening very, very rapidly, and it's not really moving a whole lot, obviously. Look at the pressure, up to about 1,008 millibars. So the pressure is rising, and also an indication that indeed it is beginning to weaken. If you are plotting along with us, that would be 19.9 north, 123.0 west. If you want to keep up with that. In the Pacific, Tropical Depression Agatha beginning to dissipate. And as you look at the satellite vantage point, you could see it a little bit better earlier today, but now really not as clearly defined, that center of circulation that we try to look for. Otherwise, what else is happening? Well, we have a little bit of a circulation here and also here, but nothing too very, very organized at this point. This is an area that is favorable for further development in the Pacific, and we would typically look to this location to see anything kind of start up. But obviously it's not happening right this second, so we'll definitely keep an eye on it for you and let you know if anything does occur. As of right now in the Pacific, the only thing happening is Tropical Depression Agatha, and that is beginning to dissipate. We'll get a closer vantage point of what's happening in the Pacific, and like I said, this is one area of concern, not really showing a lot of organization, but it's early. The other area that we're watching is right about here. You can barely even detect any circulation there. Now, I want to tell you something interesting. This past year, as far as hurricanes and tropical weather is concerned, as you well know, it wasn't very active in the Atlantic or even the Gulf of Mexico, and there was a lot of talk about El Niño. And as you look at this map, what stands out? This darker red shading, obviously. Well, that indicates where we've had a warming of the waters. In other words, El Niño, okay? Well, that seems to be starting to dissipate. So, if that does dissipate, what does that mean for our tropical season? Well, we'll have to wait and see, because there are other factors that come into play as far as hurricanes and tropical storms go. But it is one thing that we look at to see how active a season is going to be or may be. Okay, now let's check out the Atlantic tropical storms and hurricanes for 97, and you can see that obviously it was an El Niño year, and we did not have that many tropical systems, certainly not a whole lot of systems affecting the lower 48. Okay, and as we look at the map now, this is the most recent, we can see a little bit of a more cooling trend, the blues indicating the cooler trends here, and obviously the El Niño is tending to dissipate. And another year that was like that, the La Nina, was back in 1996, and you can see how active things really, really were. Well, as we check out those tropical upper-level winds, we can show you that the big area of high pressure over the Gulf of Mexico is tending to put the kibosh, if you will, on any tropical systems in the Gulf of Mexico or the Caribbean, and these are typically the areas that we would look to for development this early in the season. We do have an area of